And so here we are, part 2 of Osiris, the Divine MERKABAH. In part 1, I read to you and commented on quite a bit of information I had received, primarily, well, let's say from 1995 on to the current day. And I wanted to give you a background to understand why I'm so excited to just last week discovering these 2 other videos by other individuals, Von Donigan and William Henry. And in it, they give information that I had not heard before that correlates so beautifully with the work that I've been doing and the transmissions I've received from Thoth on Osiris and the Assyrian Vault and the Sacred On and all of that. So we're going to start with just looking at just a little bit, a few clips from these videos. I'm beginning with William Henry from his video series on Gaia TV called Jesus and the Rod and the Ring. I've only just begun listening to this series. I find it fascinating. And so I'm going to put a link to it with everything else in the reference window of this video. But I wanted to just look at these few little tiny clips here. So I can't actually reach the on button unless I have video window small. So that's how I'm starting.
There's also a metaphorical understanding, and very often they'll stop with those 4 levels of interpretation. But I've added a couple other additional levels. I believe that myth and scripture are loaded with references to ancient technology. I also believe that myth and scripture are loaded with references to an anatomical understanding, a higher spiritual functioning of the human body. And it's become my quest to understand this coding about this ancient technology and the spiritual functioning of the human body. My logo comes from the Egyptian god Osiris, who was the god of resurrection. He was sort of a prototype for Jesus, many scholars believe. And what we see in his hieroglyph here is a gateway or a shrine that is flanked by 2 pillars or towers called the Tet pillars, power pillars. We see another symbol over here called the Shuti pillar, which has a serpent levitating upon the pillar. When we put those symbols together, we form a complete device that the ancient Egyptians called Osiris. And I use that word device very intentionally because when you look up the word device in the dictionary, it says that you're dealing with a technology, with an appliance, with a tool, and also with a symbol. Think of a heraldic device, a heraldic symbol. And so I believe that this Osiris device is all of those things. I think my research reveals anyway that Osiris was a tool. It was an appliance. It was a technology, and it was also a symbol for a whole host of sciences. What we see on the left is Isis tending Osiris, and beside it is a color rendition of this done by my artistic collaborator, Mr. Dana Augustine. And so we can see that it looks on the surface to be technological. If it is in fact a technology, a tool, what function did this device serve? Well, the Egyptians were very clear. Osiris was called the tower. The tower. And what tower meant was the bond between heaven and earth. That was its function. This device was the tree of life, the ladder or stairway to heaven, according to the Egyptians. That's what it did. And so we have to imagine we're dealing with a technology that unites heaven and earth. Here in this complete rendition of Osiris being operated by Isis, which today is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, but which originally hung on the wall at Abydos in Egypt, we see an individual, the Pharaoh, serving food to Osiris. What this indicates is that this tool had a completely peaceful purpose. They're not offering dead bodies to it. They're not offering dead animals to it, like you see in other shrines or other holy places. They're offering food to this device. And it brings up a very important point when we're looking at depictions such as this.
All right, I'm skipping over now to another part.
As we look at the Osiris device, we can see, based on the relative size of the people, that this device appears to have been enormous. If these figures standing on top of this platform are, say, 5.5 feet tall, it looks like this device must have stood a good 150 feet tall. Or they're embellishing it with this notion that, hey, this is a godly device that we're dealing with, this tree of life, this bond between heaven and earth. In fact, in ancient Egypt, we do see beings that appear to be portrayed as giants carrying a device that resembles the biblical Ark of the Covenant. And that is, I believe, exactly what they are toting in this scene right here. And when we come back to the Osiris device, we can see that this platform is a ringer for the biblical Ark of the Covenant. In fact, I would suggest to you that the biblical Ark of the Covenant is derived from the original Egyptian blueprint based upon this Osiris device. And as we pull this detail, which is an accurate reproduction based on the Egyptian original, we see these figures operating this device. It looks like it must be rotating. It looks like they're operating a drill bit, like they're drilling for oil or something. We have a Lord of Light with his ox or bull on a platform attached to the device. And we have figures standing back to back at the base of the pillar. Each of these back-to-back figures, one is night, one is day. And so here's the complete rendition of the device. The Ark of the Covenant with this shooty pillar or enlightenment pillar attached to it that became the bond between heaven and earth. This device came originally from Abydos. The Abydos temple is located where it is because of this much, much older temple site called the Osirion. Researchers such as John Anthony West and others maintain that the Osirion is an Atlantean temple complex. It existed at least 12,000 years ago. It may be as old as 50,000 years. And the reason why the Osiris temple is located where it is in Egypt was because they located this former temple site. You see these massive red granite blocks, a couple of 100 tons each. How'd they move those things around? And I'm standing here to give you an idea of the relative size of these enormous red granite blocks. The Osirion is one of the, if not the most mysterious place I've ever visited. We see this massive, colossal architecture at only a couple other places in Egypt. The Valley Temple beside the Sphinx and Great Pyramid, for example. And again, researchers Robert Schoch, John Anthony West say these temples are pre-flood temples. On the exterior wall of the Osirion, as it butts up against the modern-day Temple of Abydos, we see an amazing scene here etched onto the wall that features the Shuti or Enlightenment pillar of Osiris. This to me is like identifying a corporate facility. This is the mark of this intergalactic corporation, if you will. It's like if you leave Nashville, you see a Ford Motor sign in Nashville at a car dealership, and you go to Detroit, you see the same logo, you say, ah, okay, it's the same organization. And that's the way I track this logo right here. When I see it on a temple wall in a workshop, it says, okay, this is the domain of those who taught the secrets of Osiris. And in fact, when we get inside at Abydos and also at the Temple of Dendera, we see another key example of this Osiris device, where now Isis and Nephthys are operating it. Always the women, the divine feminine that operated it. We see the ark platform that the pillar rests on. And now at Dendera, they've added this ship of the gods. This is the ark or bark of the millions of years that Osiris is going to sail into eternity upon. One of the hallmark pieces of my research is to compare the shape of the ship of Osiris with the way modern science portrays a wormhole, an intergalactic transportation system that can take you from point A in the universe to point B as if there's nothing in between. And the question is, what is a modern depiction of a wormhole doing attached to a device the Egyptians called the ladder to heaven, the bond between heaven and earth? The answer that I propose is that this device was a particle accelerator, a device that modern science says would be used to open stargates in space and wormholes. I challenge modern science yet to say that that's not what we're looking at. That has to be what it is. And of course, modern science would dismiss that notion as crazy, but what I would suggest is that, hey, those who are interested in designing these wormholes of our future had better go back and take a look at some of this ancient imagery, Atlantean or not. In fact, in the Osiris myth, it was said he entered the tail of a great serpent, was drawn through its body, and came out through the mouth as if born anew. What if that serpent is in fact a wormhole that he entered the tail of and came out the mouth of the wormhole on the other side? These happen to be Cathar drawings from southern France, a group of people who claimed they were taught a secret religion and a symbol system by Jesus and his followers that is traced to the ancient world. And I believe that what we're looking at here is a Cathar depiction of a figure emerging from the mouth of a wormhole. What the Cathars understood, and what we're going to discuss today, is that contrary to the way movies like Contact or Stargate portray it, you simply would not up and walk through one of these gateways or portals. There was an incredible mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional preparation that was undertaken preparatory to entering the gate of the gods and going into the heavenly realms.
All right. Well, as you can see, there is a lot of correlative material there. And the Ark of the Covenant, which is the true Ark, you know, there's two of them according to Thoth. There's the sacred On, as he calls it, that was brought from Osiris to earth via through Tibet, taken to Atlantis, taken to Egypt, and so on, and now has arrived here. And there's the Ark, the other Ark. He really calls this Ark the sacred On. He calls the Ark of Grace, and the other Ark he calls the Ark of Karma. That was the one that was built at Sinai when Moses came back from the mountain and found out that his followers had really messed things up and actually created a small explosion with the sacred On. It didn't damage the On itself, but it damaged one of the rods on it, I think, which was replaced. I'm not exactly sure how that goes, but anyway, the On was okay, but he didn't. He was given instruction at that point to create a second ark that was much less spiritually connected, shall we say, for them to take on with them to Jerusalem to perform certain functions that they needed at the time. But it was just a mechanical device. It was not a true light-embodied spiritual device that the On was, which could manifest itself in a physical form, but was much more than that. So what William Henry is showing here is a similar device that we now realize, I realize, is the Vault of Osiris beneath the Great Pyramid. Now, is the entire vault this device? Is this device within the vault? I believe that the entire vault is the device. From what I'm receiving from Thoth, the indications are that actually the vault may be encased in something else. It may be a vault within a vault, but what Thoth is referring to is the Vault of Osiris is the actual object. Oh, and I'm receiving what he is referring to is the chamber of Osiris is the thresholding chamber in which the vault, i.e. Ark, sits. So, or is embedded in, is more likely the term, because I believe it's literally fabricated within it. It's not removable, or at least not at this point. It isn't. It's not sitting in there like the On is sitting in a thresholding chamber. It is literally a part of it. So inside this vault sits the true crystal skull of Osiris. And obviously, the two arks, the Ark of the Covenant and the Vault of Osiris, and Thoth is indicating to me here, yes, it is a device such as the Sacred On, but it has very different aspects to it as well. Sacred On is for one part of the picture, and the vault is for another. That's why he's never referred to it as an ark, because it is not, first of all, movable and you can't carry it around. Even though it's depicted in that glyph of the Egyptian glyph it showed us is carrying it around like an ark, that is actually not the same thing. That is a like a remote control. It's a box of it. It can access it. It can work with it. But the actual Vault of Osiris, that one has been where it is now, installed under the Great Pyramid since it was placed into Earth. So it isn't moved around. I'm not going to say it can't be moved around, but it isn't moved around. The Sacred On is a portable device. So the depictions of carrying around that device that relates to the vault, it could either be the actual Sacred On before it left and went into, other realms, or it could be the like a transducer box connecting to the Vault of Osiris. So then, of course, we see the Assyrian, and the Assyrian is a very important part of the whole picture for our work with the Osiris Arising Project and the whole dynamic of the Osirim and all of that. The Assyrian is an entry point into all the Osirian vaults. I'm sorry, that's not the right word. All the Osirian temples, chambers, devices. That structure, when it was complete, when it was all together, served as an entryway, and that also took one into the Osirim. Of course, the Osirim was not at that time in Mount Kailash. It was located, well, I know it was located in the Valley of the Blue Star in Tibet, and I don't know if it was previously located other places, but wherever the Osirim was, this would allow you to enter into that field. There were other things involved with what the Osirian did, but it was sort of a platform to interact with all of these components. And I believe that it still is. However, it is not intact, far less intact in the Great Pyramid. And I don't know the whole story about the Osirim, the Osirian, sorry. So I'm not going to try to get into that any further. But it obviously is a large part of the picture. So much so that Thoth had me establish an Osirim chamber above the New Earth Star Sanctuary in Second Life, because he operates with these energies in the ethers of the internet. It's a streaming focus. It's particles of light. And so he had me place that chamber above the New Earth Star Sanctuary. And wherever I have moved, because I've moved from one land area in Second Life to another, always the Osirian chamber goes above the Spirit Heart Sanctuary land. And so it is obviously a connective node. So we're going to leave William Henry's material for a moment, and we're going to go to Eric von Däniken. So now we are looking at Enoch and the Great Pyramid, also on Gaia TV, by Eric von Däniken, Beyond the Legend with Eric von Däniken. And this is season 1, episode 4. I'm just going to show you this little bit here of the discovery of a chamber underneath the Great Pyramid. And this is interesting because when they finally find this vault, this is not it. This is not the Vault of Osiris, but it is part of the whole initiatory path that leads to the vault. Understand that the beings that were guarding this vault and that were working with it to keep the connections to the cosmos and the streaming so that they could help the planet in many ways to receive its destiny. They brought disciples in, you might say, people who had a certain amount of star genetics and were ready to accept the initiation so that this could be perpetuated. They brought them through a process going down, down, down to the Vault of Osiris. And the last stage of it was to enter the chamber of Osiris. And I don't know exactly what they did in regard to the vault. I don't believe they might have entered the vault. I'm going to be with that as we go along with this. Perhaps those will make a new commentary on that. But the procedure included going down through these stages, and the tomb or the vault that they find, the sarcophagus, that's my word I was looking for, that they find that's empty inside the crystal lake is that initiatory chamber. Perhaps chamber again is not the right word. What are we looking for? Initiatory sarcophagus, where the very much alive initiate would lie and go into a deep state with water surrounding him in this granite enclosure, created an energy field that was necessary for him or her to experience what they needed to be accepted into the final chamber. And it wasn't just a trip, a journey of discovery and awareness. It was one of physical connection to the quantum streaming of the Vault of Osiris. So that said, let us watch what Van Donegan has to say here in the images he shows.
Herodotus, the Greek historian who was there around 450 BC, he said that under the pyramid there is a lake, a sea, and the sea has absolutely clear water. And in the water there is a sarcophagus with the remains of some gifts of the god Osiris. One has to know Osiris is the oldest god in Egypt, and Osiris is the same thing which in the firmament is Orion. So Orion and Osiris is the same, even in writing, in hieroglyphics, it's always there. Now, Herodotus, the Greek historian, says, under the pyramid is a lake with clear water and a sarcophagus with some gifts of Osiris. Archaeologists never took this for true. They said, what is Herodotus telling us? It is impossible that under the pyramid there is a lake, because the pyramid finally is in the Sahara desert. There's no water, nothing. Some years ago, they found, in fact, the lake under the pyramid. And of course, I was down there. We were climbing down there. First, you come into a small room and there are stairs, 2 stairs. Now you go down there, right down in a shaft. The shaft is big enough for 2 ladders. Of course, the ladders are from our days. Then you come to a small room which is chiseled out of the rock, inside the rock. And there you see 7 niches, but only in 2 niches are some sarcophaguses. One is made out of black basalt. Basalt is volcanic stone. There are no volcanoes nearby. We don't know why they had to use basalt sarcophagus, and the other one is granite. Now from this point, you again go deeper, another shaft, into the rock. Now the first shaft was as large enough for 2 ladders. The second shaft has only room for 1 ladder. It's smaller. You have to really, with your elbows, you touch the walls. Then you come under the place, you make a right angle, and you see, in fact, a lake. It's not a big lake. It's some sort of creek with absolutely clear water. And in the water, there is a sarcophagus. We measured the sarcophagus. We made photographs of the sarcophagus. So the Greek writer, historian, was right. He was correct saying that there is a lake under there. Now, modern today's archaeologists, I asked, what did you find in the sarcophagus? They told me nothing. Now, I don't know if this is the truth or not. But the fact is, the Greek historian Herodotus told us about a lake under the pyramid, and he was right. All through archaeology for centuries said this is impossible. The same Greek historian said that the gods came down 11,240 years ago. Now archaeologists do again not accept the 11,240 years ago, because history of Egypt is roughly 3,000 years BC, but not 11,000 years BC. They disagree with Herodotus, but I suggest Herodotus is right and we are wrong. The pyramid must be much, much older, was constructed before the Great Flood by a technology which Enoch had from the extraterrestrials. The planning, the engineering planning came from the extraterrestrials.
Okay, I'm going to put that on pause. He speaks of Enoch as he believes is the one that's the creator, or at least the one that's the planner creator of the Great Pyramid. Well, Thosmozurud, those soul that came from the blue star, that was not born on the planet Earth, but came from Rigel, Thosmozurud, the first Thoth of his incarnational Thos, brought the blueprints for the Great Pyramid. Not just the pyramid itself, but the whole complex, the whole thing. He brought blueprints for a lot of other things too. And so he was the one that brought the blueprints, and from it was constructed the devices, I want to say, the pyramids. And the workers involved were the overseers, and many of the overseers were ultra beings, and the laborers were not ultra beings, but they weren't slaves. They were all part of the process of doing this and in agreement to do it. Then when the Great Flood happened, then Thoth had incarnated into the earth as Thoth Rasmus of Afra. And he still had a lot of blue star genetics, but he was, incarnated in this planet. So it was Thosmozurud who brought the Ark of the Covenant from its thresholding chamber. It had been moved from Tibet to, well, no, I guess it had to come from Tibet to Atlantis. And from Atlantis, then it would go with Thoth to Egypt and be placed somewhere for a while, and then it would eventually go to the Sinai. It's kind of hard to keep track of all of this. But in any case, it was Thoth that was brought the architectural plans for the Great Pyramid complex as Thosmozurud, and then repaired it after the Great Flood as Thoth Rasmus, and I believe added to it or modified it to suit the vibrational time that this reconstruction took place. Now, Enoch, the Von Däniken says, it's Enoch that did this. Well, Enoch, according to Thoth, he was one of the 5 souls, or one of the souls, I don't know if it was 5, one of the souls of Enoch in a layered way. That would mean he was the main energetic soul of that being. I'm receiving that. So it was Enoch that did this, if you think of it in that regard. And ancient texts might have referred to Thoth in both his Thosmozurud form and his Thoth Rasmus form as Enoch, because they're referring to the main root soul of that master being, and that's a title again. So these things can get very confusing. You're dealing with vast amounts of time with different scribes and interpretations and cultures that are registering this information, and you're also dealing with the time waves and the different time interjections. So it's kind of hard to piece it all together. but I'm attempting to some degree in regard to what Von Daniken is saying here. Now, Thoth is showing me right now that the part that has the water and the sarcophagus, the empty sarcophagus in it, and all of that, is really an extended version of the Vault of Osiris. It's like an extended part of it. So it's still part of the mechanism of the Vault of Osiris in an extended way. It was built onto it so that all of these energies that these persons that were going through this initiation could feel and experience was coming directly out of the Vault of Osiris into its extended portion that contained the crystal lake with the submerged sarcophagus. Now, it's interesting that many years ago, I'm going to switch screens here for just a moment. Many years ago, I had an experience, and this would have been long before internets, Googles. I had any knowledge of any Von Daniken, although he was probably doing his books back then, but I didn't know it. Because it would have been in the 70s, probably in the 70s or early 80s, where Thoth took me into, well, I say took me, I mean in a visual, I guess you would call it remote viewing way, beneath the Pyramid of Giza. Now, this was even before I knew anything about the Vault of Osiris. And he said it was beneath the Pyramid of Giza, and it was a, a spa. I don't know what to call it, because it was a large room with a spa. It's like a swimming area, not swimming like swimming, but soaking area. You know, it was made of cement, it was indented, but the water that came into it came from deeper aquifers, he told me, beneath the ground, underneath there. And he said, this water is very healing. And he had me soaking in it. You know, they were always trying to help me with my health. And I remember that. And he said, there's vast waters underneath the ground in the plateau of Giza. So that was then. And now we hear and understand how these waters are used and to activate the whole plateau, and certainly the Vault of Osiris. At least they're part of the whole activation. In conclusion to this part 2, just a little bit about how the staffs of Osiris connect to all of this. First of all, William Henry is talking about the rod and the ring. He believes these are basic dynamics that were used by not only the ancient Egyptians with the Assyrian device, but also by Yeshua, by Jesus. And I think he's correct about that, although the part about Yeshua, there's some little pieces missing. We might get into another video about that sometime. But in any case, the rod and also on the device itself, how it shows that rod that looks almost like a drilling device, as he said. Well, that is activating and working with these staffs of Osiris, these pillar staffs, rods of Osiris, which are energetic fields. So I just wanted to throw that in there. That's why I have included in my links a link to that article on the staffs of Osiris. So I believe we will conclude now on part 2, and I think there's going to be a part 3 coming up.